Hello, everyone, and welcome again, and happy New Year to all of you that haven't spoken to us already in this business year. Again, we've got a jam-packed episode. This is XP Group's Expose live at 5. It's a Q&A, so please do ask questions as we go through the topics that we're discussing. For those of you that are new with us, we run a multitude of businesses, service-based businesses, property development and investment businesses, and we're giving you a whistle-stop tour of our busy weeks and our learnings, our failures, and our successes. So hopefully you can grow and scale your businesses to 5, 6, 7-figure companies like we've grown ours. So without further ado, it's the 5th of January today for the podcast listeners, and we've got an exciting episode ahead. We'll be discussing PGs and what they are. So if you don't know what PG is, if you think it's a bag that you put in your tea, that is correct, but that's not what we're discussing. We've got some exciting news with our site on West Drayton. We've also got some exciting news on our site in Sunset Court, a big week of selling. You could all call it that. We've got a property flip roadmap. So a lot of people believe that buy-to-let and flips are dead. We'll be discussing how they're not and how you can structure a very successful business on flipping assets. Tenant lease negotiations, if you own commercial buildings, how you get to the point of instructing legals on getting the right conditions in your lease negotiations through. Marketing strategies for 2024. We've had 2 long meetings today, both in Central Suites and in XP Property, but I know that Aura Architecture would also have done something very similar to the start of this year. To tank or not to tank a basement. So anyone that's doing basement projects struggles with damp. We run our own HMO portfolio and damp is a big issue. So we'll be going into that. And then last but not least, the site that we completed on just before Christmas, which is Marlow. We will be sharing where we are at on that project, kicking off the year.
Nice.
Very good. So kicking off with PGs. So what we mean by PGs is personal guarantees. They are fundamentally where you guarantee debt or equity that you take on a project by your personal asset base or personal wealth. So it's very common if you bring a bank in on a project, they will take a first charge on the asset. And if it's development funding, and most commonly now with buy-to-let or fixed funding at the end, they will want personal guarantees. They want that security. I don't know why, because their loan to values normally protect them. So if a bank's going up to 70% loan to value or 80% loan to costs, it's if they dip into a higher value above that, that they want coverage that you personally can step in and pay that difference against the loan. So it is quite daunting. And I think Ben and I, over the 70 plus transactions that we've done, have built up a bit of immunity, or what do they call it? Confrontation therapy, where the more you do, the less you'd probably get too concerned about it. But we've got some tips today to help you combat that and sort of get more comfortable with personal guarantees, and then some tips to save costs around them too. So first tip is push back. See if you can push back on it. We've had projects where we've got an incoming high net worth investor that wants to protect their asset base. And on some occasions, we've managed to get them struck off the personal guarantee list. You can normally do that by, if there's multitude of directors, having one director PGing, depending on the circumstances. But what we would also try and do is push a corporate guarantee, which is a limited company guarantee, ahead of a personal guarantee. The reason we do that is your personal asset base, if you're what I would call a modern day investor, is predominantly ring fenced by limited companies. So your personal asset base might not actually be that extensive, i.e. your own home and maybe a few buy-to-lets. But the way the government have gone around taxing, it's not actually that logical to hold property and real estate, especially from a rental perspective, in a personal sort of setup, really. So what we try and do is push a corporate guarantee in front of a personal guarantee. Next tip is you can actually limit personal guarantees. So quite frequently, you will see that if you're borrowing, for an example, £500,000 debt, you will see on the personal guarantee terms that they might request full coverage on that £500,000. We put forward the argument that, look, you've got first charge, the asset's worth £700,000, our equity is £200,000. Can we limit that to 25% or something along those lines to the amount of the total debt. So see if you can limit the personal guarantees that you're pushing out. Again, both of these questions, you have nothing to lose, so you might as well ask. Third point is all monies or protected. So all monies guarantee is when the lender or whoever is withholding the guarantee against you can come for anything. The reason we like to limit those is because obviously they wouldn't get the full breadth of your existing estate. What I would say is we're talking about doomsday scenarios, and we're very much hopeful that PGs will never get called in. It's actually amazing when you hear people talk on the circuit of, they don't go into detail about how many PGs, where you've got them. But if you try and limit them to not be all monies, that means that I wouldn't have to sell my Harley Davidson should it come to it. Measures to protect. So we're now talking about when you agree a PG and you agree a PG document, you're obviously instructing that you're allowing that you're covering that sort of potential shortfall should doomsday scenario come into place. There's certain things that you can do your end with your estate, and we're not tax advisors or even estate planners or will planners, so go and seek the right advice. But there's certain things you can do to limit the access or availability they would have to step in with a personal guarantee. Now, what I mean by that is if they have taken a first charge on the asset, they basically have first right to step in, call that loan in, utilize their first charge ahead of any second charges, equity, profits, third charges, personal guarantees. They get straight to the point and get to the gold, as it were. What you can do is put measures in between the PGs. So let's say you're PGing a loan. You can actually put precaution ahead of that, whether that be a company debenture, whether that actually be a shareholders agreement that actually limits the amount of personal guarantees if you're JVing with people that have got other endeavors going on. So definitely think about that when going into personal guarantees. Now, this was actually the independent legal advice and waiver advice is actually the reason that I put this in today's episode, because every single time we sign a personal guarantee, we have to get independent legal advice to show that we're using our own will to agree that personal guarantee. If I'm really honest, it's just a complete waste of time, and you have to do it because you have to do it. It's just one of those things in the process. Is extremely rare that you're going to be agreeing to a PG on the face of it, and then when it comes to your independent legal advice actually changing your mind because you're going to buy the asset, what the parameters of a personal guarantee are, hopefully. If you don't, reach out to us. We're happy to do more sort of breadth on the topic of personal guarantee. But it's very rare that a solicitor that's independent talking you through the PG is actually really going to change anything. They go through the details of the facility agreement, the loan agreement, all of the potential risks for you signing that personal guarantee. And it's fundamentally a third-party sounding board that's running through that agreement just so that the person taking the PG can really say, you actually signed this, you are in full health and full decision-making process and were advised, so that you can't redact back on that. Now, we've had a few lenders that have accepted a waiver. And the reason being is when Ben and I or potentially a business partner know what we're getting into, we don't need another solicitor to throw us £1,000 bill just to tell us what we're getting into, which we already know. We've been doing this a while now. So a waiver completely combats that. And we sign a waiver saying we do not need legal advice for this. We accept the parameters and the risks that are on here. Now, that can save you £1,000. ILA advice is so common and really frustrating, especially when there's 3 or 4 directors and you have to fork out that money for that advice. We work legally with a city firm, a city lawyer, and the reason that I say it costs £1,000 is for them to do an ILA, an independent legal advice on a PG. They charge £750 plus VAT. Our smaller, more tin pot lawyer that's located in Buckinghamshire charges £195 plus VAT. It's a 15-minute meeting. It doesn't make a difference whether it's with that city lawyer or not city lawyer. So definitely shop around when you're getting ILA, independent legal advice. Cool. Protection. Ben, you might be able to comment on this, given the recent conversations you've had with regards to indemnities and insurance. But I mentioned above that you can put in measures to protect, and there's protections and actual certain wordings in certain PG documents that can protect your home. And that is probably, you know, that's the most important asset in our opinions to protect, because fundamentally there's one thing having to, you know, find the money together through your existing estate to pay down a loan, but there's another thing to go, you know, going through the emotional issue of losing a home. This sounds really morbid. I don't know if we should have started with this, Ben. But thankfully, we've never been in this position, but it's something to think about. Ben, do you want to touch on the protection?
I put this one in there because it's something that I've been discussing recently about, you know, private residences, whereby if you don't have certain things in place, it opens up doors for lenders to come after more than your share of your house, if that makes sense. So when you're buying a house with your wife or your partner, for example, typically most people will enter a mortgage, enter, you know, the house purchase under a joint tenancy, and that's the wording that goes into the sort of title of the mortgage and the property purchase. What you can do is change that or enter into it as a tenant in common, which basically means that kind of your 50% share of the property is all that a potential bank could could come after to a certain degree. So instead of them saying, look, there's this much equity in the property, we're calling in your PG, we want some of that, we want the equity in the property. If your partner's brought in 50% of that equity, or owns technically 50% of that equity, as a tenant in common, the bank can only come after your 50%. It may well mean that the house needs to get sold to realize that 50%, but it's not any more than what the 50% shareholding is that you've got. So having a tenancy in common instead of a joint tenancy is something that we've been putting in place.
Cool. I'll just add to that because, you know, reflecting on PGs and protecting and negotiating them is a bit like will writing. Like, you never expect you're going to be in a position that it's going to be needed, but there's no harm in getting all these measures in place. And it could be 3 or 4 tweaks on some of the topics that we've mentioned that just give you that more peace of mind and help to structure a slightly safer deal for you. Obviously, we all get excited about the profit margins and things like that, but security and safety is an equal measure that needs to be addressed, which is why we thought it would be relevant. And obviously, we've been through this quite a few times as from the front of agreeing personal guarantees. We're fortunate, touch wood, that we've never been in a position that this needed to be realised, but it definitely helps us sleep at night to really think about what you need to negotiate, what measures you need in place, and you know, putting the right things in place for when things do potentially go wrong.
Yeah, that last one is more about there are insurances out there, personal guarantee insurances, that can give you a safety net, I guess. If something gets called in, it's an insurance policy like any other. You know, you pay, from what I understand, between 1 to 2% of the premium. Some lenders will only go up to £400,000. Some lenders offer, you know, larger PG insurance, but there is that availability if you need it. Cool. Next.
On to our week of selling stuff, I believe.
Yeah, no, exciting stuff today, exciting news.
So this is what you can see here is a building we sent a letter to about 3 years ago. It was an old solicitor's office. We knew that the solicitor's lease was coming to an end. We had that information from a property tech platform. We built a list of about 1,000 properties that are similar to this, hit the list, got a bit of a nibble from the freehold owner, and about a year after that original letter, managed to strike a deal and buy this property for £925,000. The plan was to put in for mixed use planning permission, full planning permission. So it's in West Drayton. It's actually on the high street in West Drayton. And it had 2 existing retail units on the sort of curbside, as well as a substantial sized office in the sort of chapel building, predominantly, that was occupied by the solicitor. After we bought the site, we submitted planning permission for 5 apartments. We think we could have maybe angled 6, but there was a lot of back and forth with planning. and we eventually, fast forward about a year again, managed to achieve planning permission for 5 apartments, 2 retail units, and 1 commercial unit. While this was all going on, and why you can see an exit sign in front of you if you're watching on video, is we like to protect our exits and always have a secondary backup or even a third backup if you can. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is we like to market our buildings even before we've got planning or after we've got planning, to see if there is a better time to exit the property to realize similar or the same profit. And that's exactly what we did in this particular scenario. We had a really good agent who we closely worked with called BWP working on this site. We managed to get a religious community interested in buying the asset, as they wanted a foothold in West Drayton. They've been renting for years, and they wanted to buy a building to call of their own, have their own, put their own mark on it. And it's obviously nice that it's actually got chapel-like features going back into the community as a religious asset. So after months and months of negotiating while planning was running its course, we struck a price of £1.2 million to sell it to the foundation. And today we exchanged to sell the site to them. We've talked before, I can't remember what episode it is. It's probably like late 20s or early 30s episode, where we talk about exiting sites before we've actually delivered it out or built the scheme out after planning. And you can sort of see the margin we could make by crystallizing that sale, knowing where we're at, taking that capital and going and doing more with it on other sites. So some sites we deliver, some sites we sell on, and today marked the day of exchange on this building. We did offer the tenant, well, we did offer the buyer quite a creative deal on this particular project, because they are actually crowdfunding the acquisition funds within their community. So we've seen their crowdfunding platform internally go live. We've seen that they're all excited to make this their own place, and donations are actually coming in thick and fast. And as a result of their crowd raising, we've actually offered them an 8-month delayed completion on the acquisition. And we've creatively agreed that in the 8 months, they are renting it on a month-by-month basis. So the sooner they buy it, the sooner they stop paying rent. And that's better for us. But the longer they take, the more rent we get in the meantime. So maybe, a tip there for what you could call almost like a reverse purchase lease option. It's being purchased, but between exchange and completion, it's being rented. But that is how we've structured it to incentivize everyone to get this closed off. And hopefully by the summer, we would walk away with our I suppose, trade uplift as well as some rent in there too.
Nice. Very good. So the second bit of good news today is that we have now formally completed on Flat 3 Sunset Court. And if you've been following the progress on this, you probably know that it's been a long road with the sales in this development. Obviously, the tail end of last year has not been the best in terms of the sales market and things slowing down. We're starting to see things pick up again this year. I'd really love to know in the comments if you're seeing something similar. This first week back, we've got a number of viewings going on this site. Unfortunately, we had one of the other houses that is under offer, one of the chain people in the chain, it fell through basically. So we're delayed again a little bit on the sale of that one. So we've now got 2 sold of the 6. One is under offer. We've got some serious interest in Flat 4, and we are taking a couple of viewings for Flat 5 and Flat 6, which are the 2 3-beds on the site. So fingers crossed we start to see a big uplift in viewings and offers in Q1 and 2024. We do want to get these shifted as much as possible, as quick as possible, because every day that goes by is eating into our profit margin with the debt that we've got on the site, for example. So the sooner we can get these sold, the better it is for us. Cool. And then I'll just touch on this briefly. Jack's what better place to kind of talk about property flips, but I had a very good conversation. We've been talking about our business consultancy and coaching that we've been doing. I had a very good call with Lynn, who's one of our mentees, on Wednesday night. Hello, Lynn. I know you're probably going to be listening into this. And she had some amazing ideas for how we can give a few things back to you guys and help people that want to start their journey in property development with property flips, which is what Lynn wants to do. And she's very structured. She comes from a very corporate background, whereby it's having a roadmap or a step-by-step kind of guide of what the process is hugely beneficial to her, and I know it will be hugely beneficial to other people. So we will, as a company, pull together a property flip roadmap for you guys to download. I've put the link on the screen, and for those listening on the podcast, it's bit.ly/XP_templates, and there you can request future templates that we create, that we use in our own businesses, some award-winning sheets and documents that we use, and you can get access to that by going to that website. And in the next sort of 4 weeks, we'll be brainstorming and pulling together some graphics, some infographics, some spreadsheets, some roadmaps for you guys to use and for us to share around our community. So do get in touch if you want some of that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add a bit more sort of verbal substance of why flips might work for you in your business. So it's actually, Ben and I realized that when we built the infrastructure of XP Property, making flips worth our time is really, really difficult. You know, we aim to make £200,000 per development per annum into our company, because our company costs, you know, that to run. And when you're doing 4 to 5 projects, that's what we need to be hitting as a target. But within mine and my brother's company, which is Central Suites, we've got a HMO and buy-to-let portfolio already. It's a very capital intensive business, because we're buying assets, we're then refurbing and refining. Because we're based in Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, we very rarely get all our money back out. So it's a good cash flowing business month to month. But where the issues come is there's normally money stuck in each deal, which makes a combination between buy-to-lets, HMOs, as well as flips running concurrently. It's the similar stock, same types of properties that you're picking up. It re-injects really good cash back into the business. Now, how they contrast a development is you hear the golden words of 20% return on GDV. We actually don't aim for figures that high because it's not possible. We actually aim for sort of 10 to 15% return on GDV. Our sort of catchment is 250 to 400k purchase price, which means our purchase costs result to be about 10 to 30k per house. Our construction costs range anywhere between 70 and 150k, which means our GDVs between 550 and 800. We want to be in that quick end of the market. We don't want 1.5 million pound stock that takes 9 months to sell on the open market. And we tend to return a profit between 40 and 100,000 pounds per asset. And that's off about 100 to 160k investment, coupled with bank finance, bank development finance, or like a heavy refurb product or a mid or light refurb product. And the real sort of trick to the flips is you need to be doing quite a few. You need to systemize it. And the reason that they do work is the speed that you can get in and out. We've just been discussing West Drayton, where we bought a site and have sold it within probably the best part of 2.5 years, and I've only just got consent and found a buyer. Now, these flips, you can turn these around between 6 to 12 months, depending on, you know, where the property's at and how quickly you can transact on it. But we aim for an ROI of 40 to 60%, and that can produce an IRR of 20 to 80%. If you don't know what IRR is, go back to our key learnings last episode. It was last episode of the year. Ben talks about why IRR is more important than ROI, and it's basically the return on your cash that you're getting per annum. And the trick to these is if you have a really good builder, it makes the delivery seamless and you're not getting too hung up on finishing details and what sort of finish you want to go for. And you build a scalable business model with that builder, because they know what you want in asset 5, because you've already done a few projects, and then you don't need to manage them that much. When we started doing these, I was probably on site once or probably 4 times a month, so once a week. Now that's definitely down to once every 2 months, because our contractor knows what we do. He knows how to deliver them. Secure, and also on that point, the builder might actually invest in these schemes too. They know construction and building. That's their side of the business. They might be able to put some cash in the front of the deal to help deliver it. And believe you me, when they are invested, it will get done quicker and better than if you're paying them a contractual fee for the delivery. You need to secure the property for less than it's worth when you're buying it. And I know that sounds crazy, but it is a bit of a numbers game. It's very difficult to make flips work in this current market. If you're buying something for what it's worth and delivering it out on basically a development margin to finish the product as it is. So we've bought houses for 230k that have ended up being valued at 400. We bought houses at 310,000 pounds that we sold for 600k. You really need to be getting those juicy deals that need a lot of work. And when I say need a lot of work, don't get hung up on boarded up windows in the auction, because that's where all of these salvage hunters go to. Think about the sort of gross internal area. Has it already had a loft conversion? Great, because we've seen properties on the same road that have been valued at the same value where one hasn't got a loft conversion and one has. We're going to buy up the one that has, because we're going to do more cosmetic, new kitchen, new bathroom, turn it around and sell it. Whereas if we bought the one on the left-hand side, we have to convert the loft and you're immediately 50 to 60k out of pocket before you've even got the result, the one that's been valued at the same. So little tricks like that really help. And then really most importantly, speed. You need to be turning these around quickly. Otherwise, your IRR drops and the actual 10% or 15% return on GDV is just diminishing every month. The benefit of these smaller assets is they do trade in the market really quickly. We did one in Yateley in Central Suites. We took it on in January. We finished the project sort of late May, June, and we had the money in our bank account at the end of July. And that is really how quickly you can turn these around. And then last but not least, repeat and scale. If you know, you might do the odd flip, and there's quite a lot of inertia and infrastructure and learnings that will go into that. But if you're doing these really frequently, you start to get a really good flavor of what you need to be doing to the houses and putting into them. And you need to be sort of at that lower end of the market, keep trading. And where these work really well is we actually in Central Suites did 4 flips last year. So our net average return for that is about 200k into the business just in flips. Our portfolio and our rental income is about 220k, but that's paying down cash that's already left in those assets. So you can sort of see the balance of the two works really nice in sort of tandem. And you don't need to look for anything different. We're already trying to buy rundown big houses in the HMO and the buy-to-let business. So just keep going out there, put more offers out and build that infrastructure to scale a flip business. And as Ben mentioned, we're going to pull all this together to give you some ideas and support and a templates that you can actually go out and implement it yourself in your own business.
Amazing. Cool. Look forward to doing that. And on that note, you know, we are releasing 2 episodes of the Property Experts podcast a week, and we'll be doing so for the next 4 to 5 weeks until we catch up with these live versions on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can listen over at Spotify, Apple Music, Castbox, Amazon Music, all of your standard podcast platforms. Getting some really good traction. Really happy with how that is progressing. If you can do us one favor, it's share it with just anyone you might find that might find this interesting and valuable to them to grow their business, to do more property deals. We would really love that, and that's all we ask of you. So on to tenant lease negotiations. We are going through a number of negotiations at St Andrew's Court in Thame, which we did a full deep dive in episode, I think, 37. So go and tune into that. That's our most watched and listened episode. And we are currently negotiating terms with various commercial tenants that are existing in place. Their lease terms have come to an end. So we are kind of flat out back and forth with negotiations to try and find a right balance of what's right for us and actually what is right and fair for the tenants. And we just wanted to run through some of the key things that you're going to need in your leases, key negotiation tactics and tips and things that you're going to need to be looking out for when you come to negotiating commercial leases with tenants. So I think, Jack, you've just pulled out basically all of the key headings of the heads of terms and lease terms that we put together when we negotiate leases. Yeah,
so forget leases for just 1 second. Before we get into any agreement with an investor, with a seller, with a buyer, with a potential tenant, we always agree a heads of terms. And the whole purpose of a heads of terms document is, 1, so you and that other individual that you're doing business with understand each other and all of the points are laid out, and 2, to save negotiations when you're paying a solicitor an hourly rate. So that's the 2 main things. You're all on the same hymn sheet, literally 1 page that you've all agreed on. that goes to the lawyer, and then they're not negotiating for you, asking if you get this sort of rent-free period. And some of our lawyers are a few £100s an hour, and if they're negotiating rents when you could just speak directly to the individual, you'll save a huge fortune. So for anyone that's watching online, I'd screenshot that and build the sort of topics and headline figures for you to go through and agree those points with the prospective tenant. It's a lot easier if you actually just put in your expectations, because then they know what they're negotiating with. I'd always leave a little bit of room for negotiation if you do, deliver it saying this is our expectations, but not too much to scare them with, high rents or whatever it may be. But to run through them for the listeners on that aren't, online and can see this physically. So the property address, making it clear exactly what property they want to rent. Our building in St Andrew's Court and also our building in Spencer's Wood has multiple offices, so you need to agree which space they want. The tenant's name, contact details, their solicitor's details, their address, their mobile numbers, so that you don't have issues getting hold of them as and when you need to, or your lawyer doesn't when they get this document. The rent, the actual rent that will be charged in the space. This could be on a £1 per square foot value. This could be an all-inclusive rate. You need to put down there what rent you want to be charging. Utilities, what type of utilities are included? Is there a service charge, or is it independent utilities? So lining out exactly what costs they are. We actually found out that when we were letting out Spencer's Wood, because we had quite small pod spaces that suited SME or even startup businesses, they hadn't even thought through their head all the additional costs like utilities, business rates. So it's good letting them know, so you don't get £1,000 worth of legals down the line for them then to realize there's an overhead associated to business rates or utilities. So it's putting it there in front of them. Rent deposits, what rent deposit you need. You might want 3 months, 6 months, or whatever it may be. Rent reviews, how frequently you will revisit their existing rent, whether it's linked to CPI, so inflation, or whether it's linked to potentially market rate. I would recommend for commercial leases to probably link it to CPI or RPI if you can, because commercial rents don't tend to change that much. You'll notice in there we didn't put rent-free periods. Let them come up with that idea, because essentially you're pulling some money out of your pocket and you want to save that as a negotiation. For example, if you can't agree on the rental rate, then you could chuck in a rent-free period. The good benefit to doing that is the rent still stays high and your investment value on the whole asset stays higher without reducing the rent and not having a rent-free period. So that's a little tip there. The statute, so basically the agreement on the lease, the fit out, what they are expecting to walk into as a space, and whether they have any potential fit out that they want to do, and they need to pre-agree that with you as a landlord. Use and use class. I know that recently, most use classes in commercial have been banded all within one, which is Class E, but we've had it before. And actually a friend of mine runs a plant hire company, and he's really, really struggling to find a yard because of the use class. And he gets all the way down the line, agreeing the lease, agreeing the terms, agreeing the rent, and then they find out that they can't actually use that space for the use that he is looking for. So use and use class is good to have on paper. Repair obligations. Now, there's two different main types of repair obligations. That's fully internally and insuring repairing lease, and fully externally insuring and repairing lease. They're the two main differences. There are a load more. If you're in a service-based office, there's probably a minimal amount of repair obligations. But make sure that if you're a landlord, you're pushing for external if you can. Is really common in commercial leases that the tenant takes responsibility for the whole outfit. But it is quite common that if you've got a large building, that the landlord would take care of the roofs, the gutters, the windows, the access, the tarmacking and things like that. And that's an internal lease for the tenant. The handover condition, very straightforward, say as is or as witnessed in viewing. Parking is good to detail how many parking spaces they have, so that this doesn't become a deal breaker or a sticking point further down the line. Timelines, this is a really key one for me, because once you've agreed the heads of terms and you all say, look, let's try and get this legally complete in 2 to 4 weeks, you don't want it dragging. You're missing out on rent, and they've agreed to sort of move in 4 weeks' time. So it's good for the lawyer to see when they need to get their act together and get this done and complete. Inside or outside the act, so the government brought in an act, I think it was in 1973. That's going to be interesting if I've got that. I think that might be the act number, but I was referring to the year. So little quiz actually later on. Who's right, Jack or Ben? Is it 1954 or is it 1976? Can't remember. I can't actually remember. But anyway, I don't need to remember because when that act was brought out, my dad wasn't even born, so didn't bother me too much. But so inside or outside the act is fundamentally the government brought in this act to protect the tenant. So for a landlord, it's good to be outside the act. For a tenant, it's good to be inside the act. For a landlord, the reason you would want it outside the act is because when the lease comes to end or the default on the lease, you can get rid of them. And if it's inside the act, the tenant has a potential obligation legally to remain in the space subject to conditions. And they can re-sign a new lease. There are obviously conditions. It's got to be market rent. It can't be too well inflated and things like that. But it gives a landlord less flexibility to get ownership and vacant possession on that particular site. I will say, because most of our following are young, strapping developers that want to rejuvenate and develop sites, there are more simplistic ways. If someone is inside the act, you can get a redevelopment clause so if you've got potential permitted development or conversion rights to residential, there are ways around that. So I wouldn't say everything inside the act is a carte blanche. You can't get them out, but seek legal advice. That will be a barrister that you'll probably get on board to help you with that. Oh, last one, conditions. Any other conditions, whether they want to bring their fluffy little lapdog into the office or whether they want to put signage up. There's other areas that aren't mentioned above that might come in as a condition that you might want to insert within this particular section of the sort of negotiations. I'll give you an example for that. We own a current advertising board site where it's got advertising boards all the way around, and someone is actually renting the inside as a car park. Essentially a car storage section. So I had to draw really, really clear barriers and boundaries around what costs fall on which person and what conditions they had within their line of business against. So there's two people renting one site, and there were certain conditions that had to be stated to make sure that they don't, cause any issues for the other tenant, and also for business rates, valuation office, condition, upkeep of fencing and things like that.
Lovely stuff. Cool. So Jack mentioned earlier that we had, over the last couple of days and today in every business, I've had a 2024 marketing strategy review, chatting to our marketing teams about where we want to head, what we want to do. And it asked a lot of questions, to be honest. And I'm sure you're asking yourself in your businesses similar things about really what is working for you, what has worked for you historically, what you really need to be doing from a marketing perspective. And we'd love to get your insight into this, because we do these lives, we post across social media. Is it actually serving us? Is it serving a purpose for monetization and to bring revenue within the business, which is effectively what marketing is? Why would you do marketing unless there is an end goal to push things forward, open opportunities, bring revenue into the business? So we've been asking those types of questions. In XP Property today, it was very much a case of, do we actually have the internal resource and capacity to do as much marketing as we want to do? But actually, do we need to do as much marketing as we've historically talked about? And I think the answer was really no, we don't. We want to do it because we want to share our learnings. We want to kind of grow our personal brands, grow our audience, be out there and open opportunities. But actually, financially, do we want to spend the money on that when actually there's no immediate financial return to those costs? So it was a good conversation, and I think all of you should be asking these 4 questions, like, why are you doing marketing? What's the reason for it? Is it to drive revenue? Is it to drive leads? Is it to widen your audience and get some more brand awareness? Who are you targeting? So for us, realistically, what we need in our business the most is finance. It's investment. So realistically, our avatar client is Alan Sugar. We want to be targeting people that have maybe sold a business, they've got some money, they want to invest in property, they want to build an asset base, they want to build wealth, and they want to work with award-winning developers like ourselves to deliver those assets on a joint venture basis. So we're targeting finance, we're targeting investment. So why are we then looking and talking about doing a property flip roadmap? That's not actually going to help the people that are our avatar clients. So all these questions we've been asking each other today, I'd love to know what your thoughts are around it. Is there any point in us doing this? I mean, we enjoy it, we enjoy sharing, we enjoy giving back, but financially, is there an actual revenue stream that's coming off the back of that? And being open and honest, there will be, I think, at some point. We'll grow the audience, we'll grow this, we'll continue to share value, and I think kind of you get back what you give into the ethos. But is it a good use of our time? That's another question. So who are you targeting? Where do you want to be? Where's the best place to be to target that audience? We've spoken about, is that Alan Sugar, that business person who's been building their business for 10 years, who's just sold it for multi-millions of pounds, wants to invest in property, going to be scrolling Facebook? The answer is probably not. So maybe we want to be on LinkedIn, because that's more of a business platform where that type of profile may be. And then when do you want to be doing these things? When is there any point in us doing this type of live at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning? Well, no, because everyone's going to be busy at work. So Friday at 5 p.m. seemed like a great opportunity for us to kind of get people as they're leaving the office, be with them on their commute. And we felt like our audience may be most willing to listen in at that time. That's another thing that I'd really like feedback on. I think we've said this before, like, is this a good time for you guys? Obviously we've now got this on the podcast. You can listen at the Property Experts podcast. And we replicate and, we package this up and put it on the podcasting platforms for you to listen to at your own heart's content. But the lives 5 p.m. on a Friday seemed like a good place and time for us to do that. So yeah, I mean, we're in the process now building our 2024 marketing strategies, our calendars. I did want to very quickly share the marketing calendar that Dan and I in Aura pull together every year. And this was actually, to a certain degree, stolen from my wife. She is a marketing director, and she will always, she did this for me very, very many sort of years ago. And we use this now to manage our internal calendar for Aura. So basically splitting out all of the different types of marketing avenues and channels that you want to be working on. So we're looking at networking, online listings in general, digital platforms, website, print, database, video and photo, PR consultancy, and then all the various elements that go into those segments and opportunities for marketing, splitting it out on a month-by-month basis, looking at your month-by-month marketing spend, setting a budget for yourself, looking at how that affects your, is potentially going to affect your revenue. And, just to give a real sense of where we're at with our marketing, we will typically try and budget about 10% of our revenue to a marketing budget. And that might be completely bonkers for some people in certain segments, but as an architectural practice, it's worked well for us over the years, and 10% seems to be a good level to go in at. So that is marketing review, and I will try and present stuff again.
Just before we move on from that, I just want to touch on, you mentioned something really, really clear and prominently then, is like sometimes what you want out of marketing might not be what you need. And I feel like we're in quite a trend for a development company. The market in marketing is quite slow moving. We're surrounded by YouTube influencers that have got thousands of followers, thousands of views. They've got a videographer that with them every day, and they're getting likes, the views, the clicks, the hits. Whereas if you track back to probably one of the largest owned privately development companies that I'm aware of, which is Shanley Homes, his marketing is probably quite subservient and modest. He'll put hoarding around his sites, but he doesn't necessarily market his business in the same way that the modern type of potential developer would. So it's thinking about what do you need and what do you want, because it is difficult to look at others and try and follow others and imitate or or do what others do, but actually you need to sort of look from your inside out and then back in and really stress test that to see if that is the result that you want to achieve. Because at the end of the day, there are developers out there that you wouldn't even be able to find online. I was chatting to someone that actually runs an architecture practice the other day, and he said, I don't really have a website. And he's got 14 people working for him. And I was like, that's the complete opposite to Ben and Aura. They've got a website and, focus a lot on marketing, but they focus on word of mouth. They're probably a similar sized business. So, it's very different for very different entities. And you might have different ways of monetizing it or getting business, whether it's word of mouth or whatever it may be. But as you saw Ben's, it's really good to have a strategy in place across the different areas, because word of mouth is actually a category of new business. That is a way to market your business. So yeah, be good to hear what everyone thinks of your strategy going forward in 2024, and we're happy to share the ideas that we've come up with. Maybe we could do a bit more of a segment on it, because marketing is obviously one of the 5 pillars of the business that we always focus on. So operations, marketing, sales, finance, and the team. Obviously marketing is a big segment in there that needs focus of time and planning.
Definitely. Cool. I won't spend too much time on this, but if you tuned in a couple of months ago, we've had a basement leak in our house, quite a serious one. I think by the time we'd found the leak, which happened to be a next door shower leaking over months, just going into the sub void, and we reckon there's probably 5 to 8 ton of water that we've pumped out of the basement, which is ludicrous. But we're in now a bit of a quandary whether or not now that we've stripped it back to bare brick, like you can see on the screen, this is our basement. It's stripped back to bare brick. All of the finishes have been removed. This used to be a gym, living room, guest suite, shower room, storage area. Like, it was quite a big space, and we had to strip it all out to find the leak and actually pump all the water out and start again and get everything dry again. So we're now back to a shell. Our question is now, do we tank it? And you may be thinking, well, why wouldn't you? But it's already tanked. It's a new build property built 12 years ago. It's tanked externally by a waterproofing membrane externally. Since we've dried out the property, the basement, and got everything out of there, and with a dehumidifier, it is bone dry. So there are no signs of external water ingress. It was clearly a internal shower leak that had been leaking over months and months and months, and just finding its way down into the sub void. So we wanted to think about the risks going forward. Are we going to have any potential issues selling the property? If there are any questions when people make offers on the property as to have there been any insurance claims, or it's a basement, I'm worried about water coming in, blah, blah. Is that a potential barrier to sale in the future? These are all the things that have been going through our head. So it's externally tanked. There doesn't seem any reason or any water ingress, both between my property and my neighbours, because they were both built at the same time. And the internal tanking membrane is going to cost us, if we do go ahead with it, somewhere between £12,000 and £15,000. So it's not going to be covered by the insurer, because what insurers will do once you make an insurance claim is that they cannot give you any funding towards betterment. And betterment basically means putting something in that is a potential precautionary measure. They basically have to put it back to what it was previously and nothing more. So putting internal cavity drainage tanking membranes in there would be betterment, and they wouldn't cover that under the insurance. So at the moment, we're swaying towards not doing it. It is belt and braces. The thought process was, well, we're bringing it back to bare brick. If we do have any potential issues further down the line, and we've got an internal tanking membrane in place, we know that the water will be managed and removed from the property without the finishes, the internal finishes that we put brand spanking new in of, it wouldn't be affected. So yeah, just I thought it'd be interesting to sort of talk a little bit about tanking. Cool. So the last point that we wanted to run through is Marlow. We completed on this on the 23rd, I think, of December, just before Christmas. I was meeting a builder on site to talk about the strip out works, meeting my architect to run through the detailed design package, with the view to getting the strip out completed ASAP and going out to tender to find a suitable contractor. So do tune in next week and the following weeks, because we'll start to share a little bit more about the progress on site with this one, share some of the before and after strip out works, talk about some of the plans and the sales and marketing material that we're going to be putting together. What you see on screen is CGIs that we created, and we'll be building upon these with a sales brochure, potentially a little micro website, to try and get these shifted off plan whilst the works are being undertaken. So that's just a little update on our project over in Buckinghamshire in Marlow. And before we go, we're going to be doing 2 site tours this year. If you're interested in coming to see some of our sites and or potentially investing in some of our developments, do comment below, do register your interest. info@xpproperty.co.uk is our website. We'd love to hear from you. And then finally, if you can like, comment, subscribe, it really helps us. And if you can just share the podcast or share the YouTube link with just one person, that makes a massive difference to us to grow the network, to grow the audience, and bring more valuable content to help people grow their businesses, to do more property development deals in 2024 and beyond. And Jack and I love doing it. So thanks to everyone for listening. And if Jack's got nothing else to say, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Catch you later. Cheers.